March 24, 2015, Barcelona International Airport, Spain, Flight 41 to 9525 belonging to Germanwings Airlines, Flight 9525 is waiting to take off at the airport. The direct flight is an Airbus A320. The aircraft was built in 1991, total flight hours 58, 346, 700 takeoffs and landings. This is 24 years old. It is a senior aircraft. The direct flight route is Barcelona to Düsseldorf. There were 144 passengers and 6 crew members on board. Passengers and 6 crew members. Most of the passengers were fresh from Spanish Cultural Exchange v. Düsseldorf high school students who had just completed a cultural exchange program in Spain. The captain of non-stop Flight 9525 was 34-year-old Sandin Heimer has been with Germanwings for 10 years. He has more than 6,700 hours of flight experience. The co-pilot is 27-year-old Rubis. He joined Germanwings just a year ago. Although the co-pilot has only been with Germanwings for a short time, but he has more than 900 hours of flight experience. At 10:01 a.m. local time, Flight 9525, which was already 25 minutes late, finally received permission from the tower to take off. The flight began to accelerate on runway 72 at Barcelona Airport, runway 2 at Barcelona Airport, heading northwest to Düsseldorf. If all goes well, the flight will arrive at Düsseldorf International Airport at 11:35 a.m. According to the flight plan, during the takeoff phase, co-pilot Lubitz will control the aircraft, Captain Sandenheimer will control the throttle, monitoring the instruments and communicating with the ground. 27 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft had climbed to a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet, entering level flight. Germanwings Flight 9525, transferred to Marseille, France Control Center. The captain spoke briefly with Marseille ATC via radio. The captain spoke briefly with Marseille ATC over the radio. Marseille ATC was only Germanwings Flight 9525 on a northbound flight to Germany directly to the RM2 waypoint. This waypoint is located in the Alps. Any aircraft passing through here must pass this waypoint after the aircraft enters the Alps. At this point, the crew does not need to contact ATC when the plane arrives ATC's designated waypoint. 4 minutes later, Marseille ATC suddenly saw on the radar screen, Flight 9525 had a change in altitude. The flight had descended without permission from the control center. It descended from a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet without permission. In just 1 minute, Flight 9525 lost half a foot in altitude. Marseille Air Traffic Control initially thought the crew had accidentally flying at the wrong altitude. So they immediately called Flight 9525. In response to ATC's call, the German Flight 19525 did not make any response. It continued to descend. Marseille Air Traffic Control realized the seriousness of the matter, started to call Flight 9525 repeatedly but still did not get a response, and in the meantime, the plane was still dropping in altitude. The air traffic controller was so anxious that he kept calling Flight 9525. Marseille Air Traffic Control to Marseille, please respond. Marseille to delighted, please respond. After calling several times in a row, there was still no response. ATC immediately declared a state of emergency. Shortly afterwards, Germanwings' altitude dropped to 25,000 feet. Marseille ATC activated the emergency frequency. The calls continued, but Flight 9525 still did not respond. 10:37 Marseille ATC asked a nearby airspace to help contact. Still no contact with Flight 9525. Because Flight 9525 could not be contacted. ATC can only do what it can, besides staring at the radar display of Flight 9525, constantly decreasing altitude value and the constant calls. Nothing could be done. At 10:49, the plane had been lost contact with the ground for 10 minutes. At this time, Flight 9525 had entered the Alps. The altitude had dropped to about 6,000 feet. Realizing the urgency of the situation, French authorities immediately dispatched a Mirage 2000 fighter to check out the situation. 10:40 Flight 9525, flight was flying at an altitude of 3,000 feet, suddenly disappeared from the radar. The Marseille ATC control center was in a state of confusion. They didn't know what had happened to the plane. A few seconds later, Germanwings Flight 9525 at 700 km/h. After crashing into the Alps, crushingly disintegrated. The wreckage was scattered across the southern foothills of the Alpes de Haute-Provence mountains near the town of Cerne. No survivors were among the 150 people hit. After the accident, French government put 300 firefighters, 300 gendarmes and 9 helicopters in the military aircraft straight to the area where the plane disappeared from the radar. After more than an hour of search, the rescue team found the crash site of Flight 9525. The plane was smashed to pieces. The chances of having survivors were almost zero. The French Aviation Accident Investigation Team, under great pressure, the investigation was launched. After ruling out the possibility of mechanical failure of the plane itself and the possibility of a terrorist attack, the investigation team began read the data from the cockpit voice recorder according to the analysis of the black box data. Investigators believe it was the co-pilot intentionally brought 149 people along with him to crash. According to the audio data from the black box, when the plane entered the Alps, the co-pilot reminded the captain that if he wanted to go to the bathroom, "This is the best place to go." The captain really had to pee at this point, so he got up to go to the bathroom. When the captain opened the door and left, the co-pilot took control of the plane. He then set the cruise altitude to 30 meters. The plane began to descend rapidly. When the captain returned from the bathroom, the cockpit was locked. Even after entering the code, he could not open it.at this time. The screen in front of the co-pilot can also clearly see the situation outside the cockpit, but the co-pilot still did not open the door. In desperation, the captain began to find sharp objects and began to smash the door, but still a step too late. Finally the plane crashed into the Alps at high speed. So here's the problem: the co-pilot. Why did he set the cruise altitude to 30 meters? In order to find the answer to this question, investigators rushed to check the co-pilot's biography and soon found a clue. It turned out that the co-pilot was suffering from severe depression, and doctors have repeatedly advised he was not mentally fit to work, not suitable to fly the plane. But the co-pilot did not submit the case due to German law. Doctors must maintain the privacy of patients, so none of the doctors reported to Flight Management Office to report the co-pilot's condition. Investigators also found the co-pilot also had a copy at home, a sick note from a private doctor. The doctor again advised him to temporarily stop flying, to receive medical treatment, but he hid his current condition from the company. A Hansa airline said, never saw this sick note. The co-pilot, who was in a bad state of mind, just happened to have a relapse on the day of the direct flight, so he thought of suicide. But this is to let 149 people on board with him. It seems too cruel. March 13, 2016, almost 2 years after the crash, the French Aviation Safety Agency released its final investigation report identifying the cause of the crash as the mentally ill co-pilot had locked himself in the cockpit, intentionally caused the plane to crash.